to another one of our online lectures here in History Through Film. We're going to finish up our Eastern Civilizations unit, specifically the Middle Eastern part of this unit, by talking about something called Arab Spring. This is a relatively new phenomenon, and even phenomenon I don't think is the best word for it. It's a series of revolutions that started in Tunisia in 2010. And to really set this up, I want you to think about the freedom, think about the democracy that we here in the United States certainly promote and love. And, you know, I think in a way, we almost take it for granted because it's what we know, and we don't appreciate that other people in the world haven't had that. And so when you look at these series of revolutions that have occurred in North Africa and the Middle East since 2010, this event called Arab Spring, it's a really pretty amazing thing. Excuse me. You're looking at a lot of countries who have had oppressive leadership, dictators who have been in power for decades, people who have not been taken care of, and they've finally been inspired to take to the streets, to protest, sometimes even violently, to demand change that benefits the people. And one of the themes I always talk about in my world history course and my history through film course is that the job of a world leader, if you're a president, if you're a prime minister, if you're a pharaoh, if you're an emperor, whatever your title might be, but if you are ruling a country as a world leader, your number one job should be to take care of your people. And there are plenty of examples throughout history where that hasn't happened, and the people have suffered. There have been cases where the people have stepped up and done something about it, and that's really what we're going to see here. So this is an ongoing phenomenon, and I think it's one of the most important ones. So our learning target for this here, as I said, the themes that we'll cover here. We've already covered Iran hostage crisis. We've talked about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and here we are talking about Arab Spring as our last topic. Our learning target that goes with this simply says, compare and contrast Arab Spring with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I think there's similarities and certainly differences between both conflicts, and to really understand them both very well, I think a comparison and a contrast will help us do that. So that's our learning target here today. So let's do a little quick overview of what Arab Spring is. First, when we say who, it's Arabs. And Arabs is a term that's given to people really in and around the Arabian Peninsula, but it's bigger than that too. It's the Middle East and North Africa, and they're typically Muslims. So when you think of Arabs, think Muslims. So what is Arab Spring? Well, it's a series of revolutions, and we can boil it down to just revolution against aging dictators. There's a lot of countries that said, hey, we need new leadership. We want our president or our dictator who has ruled us for several decades, we want them out of power. Some of them have been corrupt. Some of them have been oppressive, and the people have demanded change. And I say good for them. I mean, really, think about it. The United States, we did this. This was what the American Revolution was that resulted in the founding of our country. We fought back against a king and taxes that we felt were oppressive, and ultimately we started our own country that we were able to give to the people through democracy. And so there's a lot of countries that haven't gone through that process yet. I mean, we're fortunate. That's why we have this great country that we do. And so other countries need to catch up. So these revolutions against aging dictators have been long in the making. Where is this happening? It's happening in the Middle East and North Africa. It started in 2010, and it's still going on, and I'll show you that today. We'll start with Mohamed Bouazizi, who is really the origin of Arab Spring, but we'll also briefly mention what's going on in Syria if you've been following the news, and that's still an ongoing situation. So why is this happening? Well, again, it's people who are upset with the leadership that they have, and it's a series of anti-government protests, uprisings, and armed rebellions. Some of these protests have been peaceful, others have not been. But in the end, it's really saying we don't want the government that we currently have, we want something new, hence the word anti-government protest there. So in a nutshell, that's what Arab Spring is, but let's kind of look at the fine details of this. To do that, we have to start with this guy, and this is a really gruesome image, and it's a really gruesome story. Mohamed Bouazizi was just a man who was trying to make a living selling produce from his produce cart, and he was harassed by a government official, and his cart was confiscated. And to protest, he went to the government building in town. This is in Tunisia, which is in North Africa, and he lit himself on fire. Now, I've got a short clip that I'm going to show you that basically tells you Bouazizi's story. So if you're watching this online, you really need to watch this clip. It's only about 2.5 minutes long, so it's very short. But to really understand Bouazizi's story, you need to see this. So I'm going to ask that you pause this, and I'm going to post I've posted the link here. You're not going to be able to copy and paste it, so I'm also going to post it in a clickable form here on YouTube. So take the time right now to go ahead and watch that 2.5 minute clip. When I'm giving this lecture in class, I always show this clip at this point, so you'll understand how Arab Spring started with Mohamed Bouazizi. So go ahead and do that, please. Now, one of the things that results from Bouazizi's action is this just really inspires people. And if you look at this key, I'm not going to go through every one of these countries and every one of their stories, but basically you're looking at all of North Africa and a lot of countries in the Middle East being inspired by this. And we've got a little key at the top that shows that in some cases governments were toppled, some cases just reforms were instituted, some cases had foreign intervention, head of state resigning, some of them had ongoing protests, and then you can see in some cases the government was able to come in and crush or cease the protest. So this is by no means an isolated incident. This is definitely something that has spread over the last 7 years, and it's the people demanding change, and they deserve that change if their government was oppressive and their leaders weren't taking care of them, as I suggested before. What I want to do is I want to use two of these countries as examples. I want to use Egypt and I'm going to use Libya. So in Egypt, there's some major change that occurred. So the Egyptians gathered to protest on January 25th, 2011, calling for an end to corruption, injustice, and poor economic conditions. So I'm going to go back to this image. You can see thousands of people were participating in this. This was a big deal. This isn't a small group. This isn't a minor sect of the population that wants change. This is a major countrywide revolution. So they wanted new government. They wanted a government that was going to take care of them. And they wanted an end to the 30-year reign of President Hosni Mubarak. Now think about it. We have term limits here in the United States. We limit our presidents to 8 years. If you have a country that does not have that type of term limit, you've got somebody who can rule for as long as they want. And if they aren't a good ruler, the people will suffer. And so this is definitely something you can see Egypt needed this change. Their president was in power for 30 years. These demonstrations eventually turned to revolution that in 18 days eventually removed Mubarak from power. So successfully here, the Egyptian people took to the streets, demanded change, and they got it. That's pretty amazing. And Egypt's still been kind of a volatile place ever since. It doesn't always mean a peaceful transition, but Egypt is still trying to figure this out and move forward. The other country I told you I want to talk about is Libya, and Libya was ruled by a very oppressive ruler named Muammar Gaddafi, and so he's worth mentioning here. So if you go just west of Egypt, you run into Libya, and Muammar Gaddafi ruled Libya as a dictator for 42 years. Again, no term limit there. He can rule as long as he wants, and he was not necessarily a great ruler by any stretch of the imagination. So he was criticized for violating Libyan citizens' civil rights and for supporting terrorism in other nations. He was not a friend of the United States. We had him on our radar for quite a long time. He was belligerent. We knew that he had terrorist ties, so there was certainly a lot going on with Gaddafi's rule that was problematic, not just for Libya, but for outside of Libya as well. He was ousted in Libya in the Libyan civil war in 2011. That means he was kind of kicked out of power. Doesn't mean he was killed, but that's going to be the last part of this story. So eventually he was killed in a firefight while attempting to hide, and his government has been replaced ever since. So Here you have an oppressive ruler who is ruling, and the people want him out of there. They eventually get him out of there, and he's eventually killed as NATO and other countries used attacks on Libya. There's one more clip I want you to watch that really kind of runs you through what Arab Spring looked like from start to finish. And I say finish because that's not really accurate because it's still going on, but at least sort of a good little timeline of what Arab Spring has looked like thus far. So again, I'll put the clickable link here at the bottom. I want you to go ahead and click on that link. It's a good kind of summary little video, and actually it was a video made by a student in another school as a class project. And I think it just does a really nice job of showing you the beginning of the protests and kind of going through all the countries that were affected by it. So I want you to go ahead and watch that short video. Again, it's only a couple minutes long, and it'll help kind of bring closure to what Arab Spring is all about. So in the end, we come back to our learning target that says compare and contrast Arab Spring with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Certainly the origins of both conflicts are very, very different. And we've got some very different political situations going on there as well. But location-wise, geography, and some of the people involved are somewhat similar, so we've got some comparisons there. But in the end, as we're going to wrap up Arab Spring here, I just want you to know that revolutions occur when the people are pushed hard enough, when the people are hungry, when the people don't have money, when they are overtaxed, even enslaved in some historical cases. Eventually people react. I mean, we as a human race have proven time and time again that if our survival is, in jeopardy, we will organize. And the better organized revolutions tend to have more success. So you saw here in Arab Spring, starting with the horrible death of Mohamed Bouazizi, who lit himself on fire, it inspired people all across North Africa and the Middle East to say, enough is enough. We're sick of this oppression. We're sick of being poor. We're sick of having a country that doesn't take care of us. And they took to the streets and demanded change. And we used Egypt and Libya as two examples to show how that change occurred. So that is going to wrap up Arab Spring. That is also going to wrap up our unit for us on Eastern civilizations. We started with the Chinese. Then we had a pretty good look at Japanese history, followed by looking at the Middle East, starting with the Iran hostage crisis, then the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and wrapping up here with Arab Spring. So I hope you learned something, and we'll see you next time.